What is research? It's a systematic process of analyzing and collecting data in order to produce valuable information, thereby increasing an understanding about a particular topic and/or phenomenon. In this topic, we'll take a look at how to collect and organize data to create research. Because research involves the collecting of data, this means that it will be statistics. So we need to understand what is statistics. Statistics is a mathematical body of science that relates to the collection, analysis, interpretation, or explanation and presentation of collected data. So statistics can either be descriptive, which compiles and presents data exactly as recorded, and on a mathematical basis, it's based on the theory of probability to draw conclusions from data. There are two very important words in statistics, and that is population, which means the group that you are interested in, and a sample, which is a subset of the group of the population you are interested in. So if you look at population, population is everybody included in that population. A sample is only a small bit of that actual population. Statistics are generally used to determine trends in societal issues, crime, health, road users, etc. You've probably often heard of the statistics for the road accident statistics over the holiday period. They say so many people traveled, so they'll take all the people that were suspected to be on the road. So let's say there's supposed to be 50,000 people going down to Durban. Out of those 50,000 people, 10,000 were in accidents. So that means there's a, what's that? 5% accident rate. So according to those statistics of 50,000 versus 10,000, that gives us that trend or whatever the case may be. Then to identify relevant characteristic of target groups, age ranges, gender, socioeconomic group. You're in an environment now where unemployment is a very big issue. Unemployment is part of what you hear every day. You may be also earning a stipend as probably being maybe somebody that's unemployed at this point in time, and you've been put on a learnership through an organization because there's statistics that have been drawn. They said out of the 44 million people in South Africa, at least 4 million of them are unemployed. So at the end of the day, we've got to find a way of how to address those skills, and we've got to find a way to get everybody employed at the end of the day. That will be the ultimate goal, although it's very unrealistic. But how did they get there? They had to obviously run out surveys. They have to see how many people, companies have to give a statistic of how many people they have working there. And then that way they can actually gather all that data, and then they can make a conclusion from it. All right, consider the attitudes or opinions of people on issues. You probably bought yourself a Samsung or an iPhone because 10 people told you an iPhone is better than a Samsung. So you took those opinions and you then went to go and buy an iPhone. You'll solve work-related challenges, absenteeism, alcoholism, future demands for products and staff planning. So it has many uses in business and in life today. There is 4 types of mentionable researchers, but once again, it's not the only types. There's a lot more out there. All right. In customer analysis, we analyze our customers, their backgrounds, what products they buy, how often they buy them to determine the types of customers that purchase specific products. Now, in cluster 9, you'll probably relate to this analysis a lot because we do a lot of customer dealings, and in terms of the market shares and things like that, we work with that type of analysis there. In competitor analysis, we analyze our product against the customer's product. We look at how customers see the brands, the products, the satisfaction of the customers, all that sort of thing. Then we get on to operational analysis, which is aimed at the operation of the business, how effective it is in various departments, how are people performing, are they making their targets, and the overall efficiency, and look for possible ways of increasing performance. An environmental analysis analyzes the environment, how clean it is, how much wastage there is, cleanliness, water, etc. Remember, first and foremost, before you can start collecting, organizing and analyzing data, you first have to plan your research. Now, remember, in previous clusters, we've dealt with a lot of ways of planning. We did action plans in cluster 3 or 4 or 5. We did action plans. Cluster 9, we're going to do action plans again. So in terms of that, you've got to remember that you have to plan first, make sure that your research plan has all the details in it, and then you're going to organize how you're going to get to the end product. And what we're giving you in this topic, I'm giving you ways of collecting or organizing and analyzing the data, not about the actual plan. All right, so let's take a look quickly. For research, we get two different types of research methods. We get qualitative and we get quantitative. Now, qualitative is concerned in the understanding of human behavior. It's a descriptive method and it's not a numerical form. So what we'll do then is we'll go and analyze or go and have a look at how people behave in different scenarios, and then we'll write a report based on our observation. And then in quantitative, that's where we look at numbers. So if I needed to find out where or how many people had toasters in their home, I'd actually create a survey and I'll send it out, or a census, and I'll send it out to people in specific areas, depending on how I planned, whether it was a sample, whether it was a population. Then I'll send it out, and whatever the results that come back, then I would actually analyze that. Right, now another example there is when we vote. All right, on voting as well, what happens is you go to the voting stations, you've got a voting pad or a voting paper, and that voting paper is generally a census or a survey as well, where you can actually mark down, and those results there are then what's allocated at the end of the day. There's two different types of collecting data or methods for collecting data. We get primary and we get secondary. Now, primary is first-hand information. That's when we send out a survey and we get information back up from the people immediately, and it's relevant, specific, and accurate. On a secondary basis, this is where we go back to previous studies, and we go and have a look at what people have done in the past, and go and have a look at previous census, and go and have a look at previous researches that were done. However, the two different ways do have their advantages and disadvantages. Now, in primary, we said that it was relevant and specific and it's accurate. On the secondary one, however, it's cheaper and it's quickly accessible because we've got information all over the place, right? On the internet or wherever. But it may be outdated, vague, and irrelevant. So if you use your secondary method, you must make sure that you check a number of sources and then actually weigh them up against each other before making your decision. Now, we have a number of tools that we can use in terms of collecting data. So when we collect data, we have questionnaires, interviews, surveys. For questionnaires, it's a determinist key. It's constructed from a series of highly organized statements. And then we get surveys, which can be done with Likert scales. It measures the extent to which a person agrees or disagrees, and it's scaled. Remember, in cluster 4, we did your rating service, and that generally was a Likert scale survey. Right, so where a clearly defined questioning technique is used to draw information from the interviewee, and that's on interviews. You've seen journalists. Journalists often use that method on a daily basis. Another way of collecting data is checklists. It has very nice advantages. It's easy and convenient to answer. The responses are easy to measure, and data can be processed uniformly. So you have checklists that people check off, or you check off for people. Do they have this? Do they have that? A census would generally be a form of a checklist. Right, then we get observations, and in observations we have a classic scientific method that can be followed, because we've got to observe and we've got to see what we've observed, and we've got to put it all together, and we've got to logically think it. All right, remember in our previous clusters about how our brain works and putting this together when we were doing writing, right? So step 1, we observe the natural phenomenon. We draw a conclusion based on what we see. We predict what might happen next. We formulate a hypothesis. We design a process or experiment. We redefine, extend, and restructure the theory. Another way of organizing or collecting and analyzing data is to use probability. Now, what is probability? Probability is the event or the likelihood that something will happen. Okay, so that is also going into a lot more comprehensive research and a comprehensive explanations. But if we take a look at very simple explanations, we can use a dice as an example. And if we look at the dice, we can see that the dice has 6 sides, and when we throw the dice, only one side is going to come right up. So when we're calculating probability, we calculate the number of ways an event can occur, and then we calculate the total number of possible outcomes. Right, so we divide the two by each other. So in this case with the dice, I can only have one outcome, and there's 6 different outcomes. So I'll say 1 divided by 6. And in this case, I've got 2 dice, so I'll multiply the one by the other, and then I'll get 1 out of 36. And 1 out of 36 will give me 0,02 and 77777. And I'm sure you can remember from your previous topic that 77777 might be a irrational number. And then we can calculate that to 2,8%. So I have a 2,8% chance of my dice landing on 6. So now you can go and play the lotto if you go and evaluate and go and take all the numbers that have previously been called, and you can go and analyze them and work out what's the probability of certain numbers coming out next. Okay, so let's take a look quickly. An experiment is a situation involved chance or probability that leads to results called outcomes. An outcome is the result of a single trial of an experiment. An event is one or more outcomes of an experiment. Probability is the measure of how likely that event will happen. So if we look at an event, in the example for the dice, we discussed just an outcome because we only took one example. We only took if we threw the dice once. But if we threw the dice, let's say 6 times or 10 times, okay, then we'll take all the results of each time, and then we go and calculate the probability again using that data. So what is frequency of data? Frequency is the number of times a certain value appears in a series of data. And when we're classifying variables to determine the frequency of occurrences, we can look at the following ways. We get nominal, which allow for only qualitative classifications. That is, they can be measured only in terms of whether the individual items belong to some distinct different categories, but we can't quantify or even rank order those categories. Okay, so for example, all we can say is that 2 individuals are different in terms of a variable, and they are maybe from different races, but we can't say which one has more of the quality represented by the variable. All right, then we get ordinal variables, which allow us to rank order the items we measure in terms of which has less and which has more of the quality represented by the variable. Then we have interval variables, which allow us not only to rank order the items that are measured, but also to quantify and compare the sizes of differences between them. And then we have ratio variables, which are similar to interval variables. In addition to all the properties of interval variables, they feature an identifiable absolute 0 point. All right, so you've got a different ratios, you've got different things that can actually be measured. Most statistical data analysis procedures do not distinguish between interval and ratio properties of the measurement scales. We determine and identify trends in societal issues such as crime and health, relevant characteristics of targets such as age, range, gender, socioeconomic, cultural belief and performance, and attitudes of opinions of people on issues by doing research as indicated, and then by interpreting this information statistically. We look at common grounds and averages to determine these trends. Now, the common grounds and the averages we're going to look at here is the mean, the median, and the mode. And these are 3 kinds of averages. There are many other averages in statistics, but these are the most common and are certainly the 3 you're most likely to encounter in your pre-statistic research. The mean is the average you're used to, where you add up all the numbers and then divide by the number of numbers. The median is the middle value in the list of numbers. To find the median, your numbers have to be listed in numerical order, so you may have to rewrite your list first. The mode is the value that occurs most often. If no number is repeated, then there is no mode for the list. Now, there's a couple of ways in which you can represent your information, and we've discussed these before when we did graphical representation in the clusters. We used pie charts, bar charts, and line charts. And one that may be new to you is a histogram, which is very often used in statistics, typically when we want to separate ranges from each other. So we'll have bins, what they call bins. It looks just like a bar chart, and it's called a bin because all the people or all the sample that was taken for the statistics has been put into one bin. So that bin would represent the amount of items that are in that specific bin. So if there's 10, it will be 10 on the graph. If it's 8, it will show 8 on the graph. If there's 6, it will show 6 on the graph, whatever the case may be, but it looks exactly the same as a bar chart. Now, just to wrap up everything that we've basically gone through, the process of researching, we plan, remember SMART goals, we've learned those, put in the type of research with qualitative, quantitative, what research are you doing, the methods that you'll be using, the items, the tools that you'll be using, whether it's interview or questionnaire, whatever the case may be, must be planned for. Then you collect the actual data, you take all the data received and or collected, then you organize it and organize all the related data together and form a logical order, just like we learned in your brainstorming, in your mind map session. You can put it together for yourself like that. Then you analyze the organized data. What did you find? What was your findings? And then you draw up a conclusion. Remember that this must all be drawn up and stated in a professional format for business. And that's a wrap for topic 4, cluster 7, and essentially for the whole cluster 7. I'm sure you enjoyed the information. Remember, these are just little snippets. There's a lot more to these things. This just sums up the main ideas. Right, so what did we learn in this topic? Research is the collecting and analyzing of data into valuable information using methods of statistics and probability. Collecting of data can be done in a variety of ways, depending on the type of research being conducted. Pie charts, bar charts, and histograms are used to present analyzed data in visual format. Plan, collect data, organize, analyze, and conclude your research professionally.